Welcome to 2819. This is the show where we aim to inspire you to go and make disciples of all nations. I'm Sandra Dimes.
And I'm Krista Oh, the teleprompter hasn't been updated. I'm Bryan Rohrenbacher, and this is the television outreach of Reasons to Believe, a viewer-supported ministry where science and faith converge.
Well, welcome to the show, Bryan. We're glad to have you as our co-host.
Glad to be here.
And we're glad that you're watching. So we hope that as you watch, you'll be encouraged to just step into conversations about your faith and do so with confidence and compassion.
And as you're watching today, make sure you get connected with us on social media. You'll find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at 2819show. We'd love to hear from you, so make sure you follow, like, and comment.
And also we have some news. The podcast version of 2819 is now available on iTunes and Google Play. So you can listen to us on the go, have full episodes, and you can also check out some other RTB podcasts. So just search for Reasons to Believe podcast.
All right, let's get things kicked off here with a quick rundown of today's show. So in Culture Talk, Sandra catches up with RZIM itinerant speaker Cameron McAllister, who's going to show us how we can use pop culture and evangelism. And I'm really looking forward to that one.
Yeah, he's a great speaker, so it's good connecting with him. In our Nexus segment, we'll hear from Natasha Crain about why parents should learn apologetics. So parents, you don't want to miss this.
Then in Give and Take segment, Jeff will talk with Hugh Ross and Ken Samples about whether the existence of carbon requires a miracle.
Should be interesting. Next in our RTB News segment, Monica's going to be catching up with you, Bryan, actually. You're going to be talking about outreach events. So it'll give our viewers a chance to learn a bit more about what you do here at Reasons to Believe and just get connected.
But first up is RTB 101, and Krista talks to Fazale Rana about dinosaurs.
Arr.
Now, I didn't think about much as a teenager, but one thing I did constantly think about was dinosaurs. And Krista's going to ask Fuzz a question I've always wondered: how do dinosaurs fit with the Bible? So let's check that out.
Now it's time for RTB 101. This is the segment where we talk about practical questions to help equip you to share your faith with friends and family more effectively. And I'm here once again with my friend and colleague, biochemist, superhero addict, I don't know what you are, Dr. Fazale Rana.
Hey, Krista.
Welcome, Fuzz. And I thought it would be great if we talk about a very common question that we get, and that is dinosaurs and the Bible. How do they fit together? Yeah. So maybe we need to lay a little groundwork here.
Yes. And the first thing is that at Reasons to Believe, we're old earth creationists, which means we view the days in Genesis 1 as periods of time, as eons, as epochs. And so because of that, we don't see a conflict between Genesis 1 and the antiquity of the earth or the antiquity of life on earth. And so we would say that as old earth creationists, God created the dinosaurs about 260 million years ago, as the scientific record indicates, that they disappeared about 65 million years ago with the famous KT extinction event, and that dinosaurs never lived at the same time as human beings.
Okay, very good. So we're creationists, so God created dinosaurs. Yeah. But so believing, even though that when you say God created them 250 million years ago, we're not saying we're evolutionists.
That's right.
Okay, so that's an important distinction there. So we accept the conventional ages. So if my child gets a book from the library, all of the information about the dating, I don't need to feel concerned or worried.
That's
or
right.
Anything about that.
That's
okay,
right.
Good. So now when we're talking about dinosaurs aligning with the creation days, long periods of time, what creation day do dinosaurs appear?
Yeah, and here again, a little bit of groundwork before we get into that question. The way I look at Genesis 1 and the way we look at Genesis 1 here at Reasons to Believe is that it is a historical description of God's creative work. It is not a metaphor, or we're taking it literally, but that the days of creation are snapshots. They're like highlights of what God has done. They're not everything that God has done, and they're organized more or less in chronological order, which means we would probably place the creation of dinosaurs on the end of the fifth day, the beginning of the sixth day, where the creation of humanity is at the very end of the sixth day.
Okay, very good. So I like your analogy there of snapshots. Immediately what was popping in my mind is if I were to take a trip to Disneyland with my kids and I would take a bunch of pictures and then I might put them in their scrapbook, but I'm going to arrange them in the order that they happen, but I don't take snapshots of everything. It's
That's
just
right.
the highlight reel.
That's right. So there's
Okay.
information about God's work as creator that is not present in the creation accounts, but we have the privilege to discover what God has done through the mechanism of science.
Okay, so that makes me think then that dinosaurs, that leads to the question, are dinosaurs mentioned in the Bible? I'm not getting the feeling they're mentioned in Genesis 1, though.
Yeah, I don't think they're mentioned at all in Scripture.
Okay.
And again, there's a lot of things scientifically that are omitted from Scripture. Now, some people might say Job 41 is making reference to dinosaurs with the behemoth and the leviathan. But we have to keep in mind that Job is a poetic book. And so there's poetic language that's being used there. And in fact, the description of the leviathan and the behemoth doesn't fit any creature that exists. So it's a poetic description of either mythical creatures or maybe a hippopotamus and a crocodile.
So it's sort of debatable as to what
Right.
those creatures are. If we're correct about dinosaurs and humans not living at the same time, those creatures are probably not dinosaurs.
That's right.
Okay, got it. So the snapshots of Genesis 1 don't include dinosaurs. It's not on the highlight reel, but boy, they're interesting.
They are a lot of fun to study. You know, and we have to keep in mind that God has made himself known to us through the record of nature. And for me, dinosaurs reflect the awesome power of God, but also the artistry of God. Who doesn't love dinosaurs? And you just see an artistic flair when we look at the fossil record and we imagine what these creatures would have been like.
That's so good, because there's something I think in us as being created in the image of God, just enjoying the discovery. And
Yes.
God's put that out there in the creation for us to go explore.
Yes.
Yeah, that's very cool. I want to encourage you to check out Fuzz's blog, The Cells Design, and follow him on social media. Next up in our Nexus segment, we're going to hear from Christian parenting author, blogger, and speaker Natasha Crain about why it's important for parents to learn apologetics. Let's check this out.
Well, I think that as Christian parents, we all know that we are called to disciple our kids. But the question is what exactly does that mean? What does it mean to disciple our kids? And specifically, what does it mean to disciple them in today's world that they're living in? For a lot of Christian parents, I think the answer to that is, well, I'm going to do the best that I can. I'm going to do what makes the most sense to me. I'm going to do maybe what my parents did or what I see my friends doing. And we approach it in that kind of way where we're just kind of winging it. But if we're really honest with ourselves, we don't do anything else in life in that way when it's something really important to us. So just to give you an example of that, my son recently found out that he was allergic to something. And we didn't know what exactly it was, but I did know that this could be really serious. This could be a matter of life or death at some point. And so I went into crazy mom research mode, and I wanted to research and find out everything that I could. I wanted to know the best doctors. I wanted to know the best testing methodologies. I wanted to know the best treatment plans. I wanted to know everything so that I could find out my son's needs and specifically match my parenting actions accordingly. What I didn't do was just go to my bathroom cabinet, open it up, see what I happen to have on hand and say, oh, okay, well, I hope this works. I didn't do that at all because I wanted to know what my son needed, not just what made the most sense for me. And in that same way, we should approach the discipleship of our kids. We need to look at what it is that they need today so that we can match our parenting accordingly. So of course the question is, okay, well, what does that mean? What do our kids need today? And fortunately, there's been a lot of research that can help us with that. The research overwhelmingly shows that at least 60% of kids today are walking away from their Christian faith by their early 20s. And you can really dig into these research findings and you can look into the reasons that kids are giving. And what we find overwhelmingly is that they're encountering intellectual barriers to faith and they're turning away from their faith because of it. So for example, they're hearing that there's no evidence for God's existence. They're hearing that there's no evidence that Jesus even existed as a person in history, that there's a conflict between God and science, and that the Bible is filled with errors and contradictions. They hear all these things, but overwhelmingly they have not been prepared to encounter them. The church hasn't prepared them, and their families haven't prepared them. They hear these claims against the truth of Christianity. They don't know where to go. They don't know that there are good answers out there, and they walk away. As Christian parents, it is our responsibility to see this as a problem, just as I could see that my son had an allergy problem, and to determine what is the best way to prepare our kids to encounter that, not just what happens to be the easiest thing for me as a Christian parent, or what makes the most sense to me. So that's really where apologetics comes in. Apologetics just means, how do we make a case for and defend the truth of Christianity? In other words, how do we know Christianity is true? Our kids so desperately need that understanding today, given this world that they're growing up in. And they're not going to have it if we aren't prepared to talk about it with them. So that's why we as parents need to have that understanding. And it doesn't mean we have to be an expert. No one's saying we all have to be experts in apologetics. But what we do need to be is a knowledgeable guide for our kids so that we can raise them in the confidence that Christianity really is true.
Now it's time for Culture Talk. This is the segment where we talk about culturally relevant topics, everything from movies and books and TV to just everyday conversations, and helping you engage in those with confidence and compassion. So we have a special clip from RZIM itinerant speaker Cameron McAllister. We caught up with him recently at the AMP conference hosted by Reasons to Believe, and we talked about how pop culture can be used as a tool for evangelism. Let's check it out. So thank you so much for joining us. I love what you're doing in pop culture world and how you're really engaging that content. I want to ask though, let's take a look at what are we seeing as messages being communicated in pop culture?
It's interesting because I think one of the repeated messages that I'm seeing in a lot of our current shows is that you've got this very different view of skepticism now, where it's sort of presented as being smarter, more transparent, more authentic. So if you think about a show like True Detective, season 1 of True Detective, let's just pretend like season 2 didn't happen. But in season 1, Matthew McConaughey's character, Rustin Cole, aptly shortened to Rust, he's one of the more fascinating characters we've had in a while. He's got a very ruthless view, and he is willing to embrace the full consequences of a godless universe. And we see that over and over again. And I think the way he comes across, though, is not as despairing and hopeless, even though his view is. He comes across as brave, courageous, and incredibly intelligent. And that's very appealing.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people have been really drawn in by that. And I think it's become sort of internalized. It's one of those assumptions that a lot of people have in general about skepticism. But these shows are entertainment. They strengthen that conviction in the general public. And many Christians buy into this, that generally speaking, skeptics are smarter, they're more authentic, they ask the hard questions, and they're willing to face reality as it is, even though that's not necessarily true.
As we think about pop culture, how can we encourage Christians to move from really consuming the content to actually helping create it?
That's a very important question, and I love the way you've phrased it, because we don't want to just be mindless consumers. We actually want to thoughtfully deal with it. And I think it's interesting because in the past, you could go home from a hard day's work with the expectation that, hey, I'm going to chill out in front of the TV and just relax. Yeah. But a lot of these shows, Breaking Bad, True Detective, Mindhunter, they're asking some of the most difficult questions about human nature, about origin, meaning, morality, destiny, all these great questions. So they can be really powerful conversation starters. I often find that when I'm talking to people, if I mention the name of Jesus too soon, it's almost like invisible shades come down over their eyes and they're suddenly a million miles away, they're done talking to me, they've already tuned out. But if I talk about Breaking Bad, for instance, they'll talk my ear off about it. And often a conversation that starts with some television show or some popular novel will end up going all the way to the ultimate questions. And so these shows can be a real opportunity for us if we're paying close attention and we're looking at this, not just at these shows and different forms of entertainment, not just as tools, because they're more than that. They're works of art. Evaluating them holistically, then we can have a lot of really good conversations and we can actually talk to people about Christ.
If you want to hear more from Cameron McAllister, check out RZIM's Vital Signs podcast. Now we're going to head over to Jeff for Give and Take, and he's going to talk with Hugh Ross and Ken Samples about the existence of carbon and does it require a miracle. Let's check it out.
Hello and welcome again to Give and Take. I'm Jeff Zwerenk. This is the segment where we explore the latest scientific ideas to help you be more confident in sharing the gospel. Today we're joined by Hugh Ross and Ken Samples, and we're going to investigate an important question. Does the existence of carbon require a miracle? Ken, Hugh, it's good to have you here today.
Hi, Jeff.
Hi. So we're going to be talking, as the show goes, about carbon and how important it is and what we know. But I want to delve in first to this idea of a miracle. And if we're explaining carbon and kind of understanding it, doesn't that remove the miraculous nature of it? Ken, what does it mean to have a miracle happen?
Well, God creates, but he not only creates, he sustains his creation. He guides and directs his creation toward his sovereign purposes. So that sustaining and guiding and directing, that's providence. And God can have what we might call a ordinary providence or an extraordinary providence. And so carbon would be, the extraordinary nature of carbon would be part of God's ordinary providence.
So in essence, you might be able to say the miraculous is anything God is doing and working, if you will. And so God works in somewhat ordinary means or just how the universe works. And then sometimes he works in extraordinary fashions.
That's right.
So what would be a sign of some of those extraordinary fashions? What would those look like?
Well, obviously, the God calling all matter, energy, space, and time into being from nothing is the most extraordinary act. But there would be the intervention where God intervenes from the transcendent into the immanent world. But I don't think we want to pass over the idea that the sustaining and controlling is any less miraculous. It's just part of that ordinary, but ordinary is in some ways still extraordinary.
No, I agree, and I want to kind of go back to what you made that distinction there of, God calling all existence into being. That's kind of almost by nature beyond the laws of physics or beyond explanation,
sure,
if you will. But you also kind of alluded to extraordinary things that we might even be able to have a physical understanding of.
Yes.
How does that work? I mean, does that still remove the miraculous nature of it?
I don't think it removes it at all. I mean, if you think of the fine-tuning that the universe reflects this design that allows for the appearance of complex life, I would say, even though we can understand a lot of that through the laws of physics, it is the creation of the laws of physics. That whole creation reflects still kind of a miraculous, but again, I would see it in terms of providence and an ordinary providence rather than an extraordinary type.
Well, let's kind of explore one of those fine-tunings, and this is something that, in some sense has been around for many decades. Looking at the existence of carbon, I mean, when I was writing Is There Life Out There, just kind of reflecting on how remarkable carbon is in its unique capacity to support life, foundational to life, but yet even as we look at how the universe behaves, carbon being here is something pretty extraordinary. Can you kind of explain a little bit of that for us, Hugh?
Sure. Well, my colleague here is carbon-based, so carbon's important.
Yes, I agree.
For life. But it's a miracle that the universe has any carbon at all, because the universe began with no carbon. All it had was hydrogen, and the first few minutes, about a quarter of that hydrogen got fused into helium, but still no carbon. And the miracle is that if you take the ground state energy level of helium and take 2 of those, it equals the ground state energy level of beryllium.
Okay, so let's kind of hash that out a little bit. So we got to take 2 helium, put them together, and we're going to get beryllium. But how does that help in carbon, if you will?
Well, helium is a nuclear weight of 4. It's got 2 protons and 2 neutrons.
Right.
Okay, beryllium is 8. So 4 plus 4 equals 8. But you won't get 4 plus 4 making 8 unless the ground state energy levels of 2 helium equal very closely that of beryllium, and it does. So that means you can actually get beryllium in stars, and then the next step is adding a helium nucleus to a beryllium to get carbon.
So in essence, by having that beryllium, you can take 2 carbons, get them together, and so instead of having all 3 of them come together, it kind of gives you an intermediate step that allows that reaction to carbon ultimately to go faster.
Right, so the 2 heliums come together to make beryllium, the beryllium and a helium come together to make carbon. That all works because of how incredibly fine-tuned the energy levels are for helium, for beryllium, and for carbon.
And so this is kind of going back to what Ken was saying, that God has sustained the universe either so reliably, we talk about the laws of physics, these energy levels are ultimately dependent upon the laws of physics, are they not?
They are, And without that fine-tuning of those laws of physics and those ground state energy levels, there wouldn't be any carbon in the universe at all, and there'd be no Ken samples, which would be a real disappointment.
So when we talk about carbon, I mean, I think even getting to having the process to make carbon is important, but I think there's even more beyond that.
There is.
So that it doesn't all disappear in some other fashion.
Well, in order for Ken samples to exist, you need roughly equal amounts of carbon and oxygen. And if we're not careful about the ground state energy levels of carbon, and they're slightly different, but if you actually were to make them equal, what would happen is all that carbon would become oxygen. So we'd have lots of oxygen, but no carbon.
Because that's like where you take the beryllium and add the helium to it, it makes carbon. You take carbon and add helium to it, and it makes oxygen.
Yeah, you take the carbon and helium, you get oxygen. And yeah, the ground state energy levels are really very close to one another. All that carbon gets moved into oxygen. On the other hand, if you make them too far apart from one another, then what you wind up with is lots of carbon and no oxygen. You need lots of both. And because of how they're tuned to very exacting levels, we get roughly equal amounts of carbon and oxygen.
It really does sound like the tuning is pretty remarkable, because you've got to have the tuning in order for carbon to be produced, but then you also have to have things tuned so that all that carbon doesn't just immediately convert into oxygen.
Right.
And so now you've got kind of that balance of the two, which, you know, without carbon and oxygen, you don't get carbon dioxide, you don't get water, and all the things that are critical for life.
That's right.
You know, it really is remarkable that when we look at this universe, it is sustained very reliably and consistently. And that's what Ken was talking about with that providence, that God is at work in sustaining creation. But we also see, as we investigate it and delve in, that creation is very well designed, or fine-tuned, if you will, in order to produce the things that life relies on. And that we see God's signature in that. And we can look, and it really is a remarkable, miraculous thing. You know, I want to encourage you to go. Hugh has written an article called Carbon, the Miracle Element, where you can explore that more deeply. But what you will find is, as you read that article, you will be equipped to see how God has designed this creation for us to be here. And you will have tools that will allow you to engage in conversations where you can bring the gospel and share Christ with your friends. Now let's go over to Monica. She's talking to Bryan about RTB's outreach events.
Hey, I'm Monica Jones, and today I'm talking to Bryan Rohrenbacher. Bryan is our outreach manager here at Reasons to Believe. So, Bryan, let's talk about events. Tell me the type of events that our scholars speak at.
Yeah, well, our scholars speak all over the world, and they do events like church services, special outreach events, speak at apologetic conferences, university events, and sometimes they'll even attend and speak at different types of luncheons or meet and greets.
Okay, so if I'm at one of these events, do I have an opportunity to have a personal connection with the scholars?
Yeah, in most cases you will. There's always a Q&A session after they speak, so you'll be able to ask some of those questions about clarification or some of those burning questions you've been holding on to for a long time. In addition to that, we usually have a book table at these events, and our scholars love to hang out at the book table. So you can go there, get a book signed, maybe ask a couple more questions, and even take a picture with them. Actually, Hugh Ross loves taking selfies, so if you're at an event with him, make sure you stop by the book table and ask for a selfie.
I hope that's true. Otherwise, you just lost your job.
It's
all
true.
right, so I'm all in. So how do I find out more about upcoming events?
Yeah, the best way would be to get on our email list. Every Wednesday, we send out an events email that has a list of all of our upcoming events and chapter meetings.
Okay.
So to get on that, you'll want to subscribe. Go to reasons.org/events update, and that URL is right here on the top of the screen.
Okay.
That URL is right here at the bottom of the screen. Yeah. So just go there. But really, you just want to go reasons.org/events updates, and you'll get on our mailing list. So every Wednesday, you'll get that email letting you know what's coming up in your area.
That's awesome. Thanks for being with me, Bryan. Well, I hope you will check out reasons.org/events update. I'd love to see you and connect with you at our next event. See you later.
Hey, everyone, I'm back. So once again, we hope to see you at an event that we're coming to. So make sure you check out reasons.org/events update so you know when we're coming to a town near you. That about does it for us. Thanks for joining us this week on 2819.
And we hope that as you've been watching that you'll learn something from this show. We know that sharing your faith today can be kind of scary and intimidating, so hopefully you've learned something that will help you step into conversations with people.
This show is made possible through the faithful support of Reasons to Believe donors. If you feel led to support resources like this, please visit reasons.org/2819.
And until next time, be sure to check us out on the web. We're at reasons.org. We have tons of great blog posts, articles, podcasts, all just pointing people to how God's world and God's word are in harmony.
And make sure you find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at 2819 Show. We'd love to hear from you, so please like and comment and let us know what's your favorite dinosaur.
We'll see you next week.